Hi, I'm Zach Singerman, and welcome to the Gen Z Jew Speaker Series. In this series, I interview national leaders on the topics of anti-Semitism, Israel, and leadership. Today, my guest is AJ Edelman, a four-time Israeli national champion in the skeleton event who competed for Israel in the 2018 Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang, South Korea. Mr. Edelman is the first Orthodox Jew to compete in the Winter Olympics. He also graduated from MIT with a degree in mechanical engineering. He is currently training for the 2022 Beijing Olympic Games and is the program general manager for the Israeli Bobsled Team. Mr. Edelman, thank you so much for coming on today.
Such a pleasure, Zach.
So, in your TEDx talk, Dare to Fail, you explain the different ways people talk about failure. How would you talk about failure, and how do you think it can be used to motivate someone?
So failure is, the first line of my LinkedIn profile is failing often. And it's because failure is actually an indication that you've overcome the inertia of doing nothing. So people who have a lot of failures have by definition pushed through the human tendency to sometimes sit back and let things pass them by. And so failure is actually quite wonderful because failure stings. Failure, like how many times have you actually succeeded in hitting a game winner? Right, or doing something or getting a great score on a test, for example, but that's soon forgotten, and you always forget the failure of the test because you have to retake it again, or make sure that you study harder. So failure is actually an incredible motivator and just a wonderful thing to have in general.
And so, just on the topic of leadership, how did you mentally prepare yourself to train so hard to get Israel to qualify for skeleton in the 2018 Olympics that you gave up even things like seeing your family and friends?
So it's a great question. It's really hard to answer because I try to, you'll have to pardon me. I'm at a dog park. I work the entirety of my day at a dog park on the team related stuff. And at the same time, the team's mascot, Lulu, who's a Shiba Inu, he's really wonderful. He runs himself to sleep. So if dogs come up, you'll have to excuse that. But in terms of keeping yourself motivated, we all need a reason to keep going that's both personal and larger than ourselves. And for me, I developed this mantra. It was called for myself, for my people, and for my country. And it always reminded me of why I was doing what I was doing. First and foremost, I wanted to overcome this terrible scouting report that I had been given that said that I would never be competitive. It basically flat out said that I would never make the Olympics. And so the first and foremost thing for me was I had to try to overcome on a personal level that disappointment and negativity. But you can't subsist on selfishness alone for years at a time or achieve any great goal that's purely about yourself, and you need something larger. And so for my people and for my country is like a really important and critical part of doing that. And I knew that anytime that sorry, there goes the mascot. Anytime that I was close to burning out or I did burn out, I just remembered that there was nobody else who could do this to the extent that I'd be able, there he's back there. There's nobody else who could do this for Israel. And at the same time that in 2016, I was going through a really, really difficult time. It was 2 years to the day that I received the scouting report that I did. It was my 25th birthday. I was training in Sigulda, Latvia, it's a terrible place to be. And I burned out, but then I realized that I was stealing Israel's chance. By quitting, I was stealing the country's chance, which had given me such a bracha, such a blessing to represent them, of being able to compete. And so quitting was just not an option. It was like Geneva, it was theft. And so that's really what I would say has kept me motivated is you need to find what you think personally is where you fit into a larger mission. And for me, that larger mission is representing Israel through sport, representing my people through sport, and moving things forward. And so quitting is not just quitting on yourself, it's quitting on this overall grand scheme of where you fit into the world.
And how do you think teens can put a similar mental focus onto their goals?
So specifically with teenagers, you guys spend it's a fascinating question for the following reason. A lot of what motivates me now is because of what happened in my formative experiences when I was 10, 11, 12, and subsequently thereafter. So at ages 10, 11, 12, I was pretty mercilessly bullied, and it caused a lifelong familiarity with depression and sadness and self-doubt. And it's something that I continually have to work to overcome. And it's something that teenagers experience all the time. Shunning, not being accepted by your friends, it's just exceedingly difficult. For teenagers to take things to heart, realize that none of what you're doing now is really permanent. So you have an entire life ahead of you to do anything that you want. And so really what I would say is this is the time to do anything that you want and stick to it, because you have 70 plus years or more. So by the time you guys are 70, science will have advanced to the point where we're all going to be living on Mars, and we'll be living to 255, right? So bullying, I always talk about bullying because it's so prevalent with teenagers and it has formed who I am today. Bullying is somebody who's tying a rope to you. They're conceding the fact that you are above their level. They're tying a rope to you and trying to pull themselves up while pulling you down. It's a huge, huge realization if you eventually come to realize it. And it sucks. It's never going to really get through, because when you're being bullied or being put down, it hurts no matter what you think. But at the end of the day, I think time is what always fueled me. So I always knew that in 20 years, I wouldn't see those kids again. I would never see those kids again, especially the kids who were jerks, right? And in time, if you're 14, 15 years old, in 15 years, you're only going to be 30. You're going to be just about where I am now. I'm 29 years old. So in 15 years, double your lifespan, you're still not going to be potentially you'll be married, but potentially not. You'll still be in the prime youth of your life. So time is on your side.
That's really cool. So how did you manage to come back and not walk away from skeleton after you broke almost all your ribs?
Exactly what I just explained about having a mission larger than yourself. I knew that walking away from skeleton was not only a letdown to my supporters, it was not only a letdown to myself, but it was really stealing the country's chances. And not everyone has to feel like the country is relying on them or the world is on their shoulders. But I think at the end of the day, you need to find something that speaks to why you've done what you've done in the first place. And why I did what I did in the first place was to represent Israel in a proper manner on the biggest stage that I could. And quitting, therefore, was just not an option. Motivational tools are always incredibly useful. So it may seem cliche and it may seem weird if somebody shows you a motivational video, but they absolutely work. Like the Thank You Moms commercial from P&G, which I watched on a daily basis. It's a great commercial that comes out at the Olympic time. There's always a new one. I watched that every day and cried every single time I saw it. There's a hockey player in there at the end of the Sochi 2014 Thank You Moms commercial. It's really, really powerful. And I grew up playing hockey, and I'd always put myself in the shoes or in the skates of that hockey player, and it would always make me cry, man. But, eventually, I knew that I wanted to get there. I wanted to be that person. So figuring out where you want to go, where you have been, why you're making the journey that you're making, and then using the right motivational tools. And that could be family, it could be friends, could be your dog. Lulu, come. Lulu, up. This is Lulu, our team mascot. And he's absolutely adorable. He's a Shiba Inu. He's just so terrific. And he keeps me going now. You always need someone to keep you going. I mean, look at that face. You can't deny that face, right? So, it's just important to find what works for you. And everyone is completely different.
Mm-hmm. And so you qualified for the 2018 Winter Olympics in skeleton. So, what drove you to now try to qualify for the 2022 Olympics?
Honestly, it's because I had found, I was passing through an airport in Seoul. It's called Busan Airport, 2 months after the Olympics, back in 2018. And somebody passed me a sticky note that I put in the back of my phone case. And it said that they had seen me compete. And it was a Korean person. So she had probably never met an Israeli or a Jew. This was the first interaction. So, she didn't know who I was. She saw the jacket, though. And she put 2 and 2 together, and she said she saw me compete. and it was inspiring, and she wanted to see me in the 2022 Olympics. And I kept that note and still have it. It resides in the back of my phone, and it was proof that we don't know on whose scale we register, right? Like, it takes almost nothing for you to alter somebody else's course of life, for the good or the bad. Like, a bad word or a bad saying can drastically hurt someone, but a small bit of encouragement or even something that you have no idea can touch someone can absolutely touch someone. And that really resonated with me. So I kept the note. And in April of this year, I kind of realized that the mission was not complete. Everyone knows bobsled. Not many people know skeleton. And so the best way to really do what I wanted to do for Israel, which was to increase the awareness, the ambassadorship of Israel as a nice place to be, Israelis as nice people, was to represent them in bobsled and get this bobsled program off the ground. So that's when I decided to found this mission.
That actually answered my next question, which was going to just ask, like, why you changed from skeleton to bobsled.
That's exactly why I changed from skeleton to bobsled. Also, bobsled is a lot more fun. It is a lot more fun, and it is, in my opinion, a lot less painful.
So now just, like, moving on to the topic of Judaism. So, as an Orthodox Jew, how did that play into you achieving your goals?
That's a great question. Being modern Orthodox is something that, so I think especially growing up, we associate the terminology of who we are as, like, maybe the best way to explain this is somebody said, what makes you modern Orthodox? I said, what makes me modern Orthodox is not the fact that I was born modern Orthodox. It means that I believe that the set of rules for which I may or may not be keeping to the best of my ability, right? So, like, I know many modern Orthodox people who do things on Shabbos which other modern Orthodox people would not. But that doesn't make them any less modern Orthodox. It just means that they acknowledge that the rules are in place and they're following them to the best of their ability or what they want to do, right? And so modern Orthodoxy, forgive me, it's like there's a lot of like falling out here, but the modern Orthodoxy is, to me, an important part of my life because I just acknowledge that I live within a belief system. And there are some times that I'm really, really bad at following that belief system. And it's okay. Like, lives which go on a consistent level are not as good, in my opinion, as lives that go up and down and up and down and up and down. So long as you finish on a higher rung of the ladder that you started, who cares, right? So, like, that to me, it's important. It's part of my identity. I always make sure to conduct myself appropriately when interacting with other people. And I would encourage anyone who's watching this who wonders where they fit in the grand scheme of Judaism. A Jew is a Jew, right? So, like, you don't need to really label yourself as a Jew as a Jew. The reason I'm very proud to call myself modern Orthodox is because I fit within a certain segment of the belief system, and an Orthodox Jew had never competed in the Winter Olympics before. But, you know, if you're watching this and wonder where you fit into the grand scheme of Orthodox conservative reform, a Jew is a Jew, and historically that has very much been the case. Nobody has ever discriminated based on how much you believe in what you believe.
And so you took one of, like, the biggest stands for Israel someone could take. So how do you think Gen Z Jews should also stand up for Israel?
I think realizing that passivity and letting things slide, there's a tendency for, it's very difficult to say to a group of people who, as youth, and I consider anyone really under the age of like 35 to really be kind of youthful. So on the younger end of the spectrum, we want to go change the world. I still want to change the world. That's why I'm doing this mission, right? But teenagers have the capacity to do an insane amount, right? You're still not even out of high school. So the inclination and the preference, and I think historically for Jewish people in particular, is to fix the world around them, right? And so when there are injustices all around us, we try to fix those injustices without paying enough attention to our own community as well, right? So it doesn't mean that one comes at the expense of the other. But it does mean that we do need to realize that we need to support each other. And that has often culminated in basically standing up for what you actually think is right. And if somebody attacks you or somebody believes that you have if somebody makes any characterization about Jews in front of you, or acts in a certain way towards you, or about Israel, the answer is not to be passive about it, because passivity actually doesn't bring change. You don't have to be forceful. You don't have to go clock someone in the face, but you do have to respond, because if you don't respond, then it's just thrown out there, and that helps move the needle towards the status quo, and that's always very, very dangerous.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Mr. Edelman. This was really inspirational.
Please call me AJ for forever. My grandfather is Mr. Edelman.
Well, this was really inspirational. I think that the rest of Gen Z Jews would agree. Thank you so much for coming on today.
I very much appreciate it. Anyone who has any questions, or if you're dealing with also like bullying, mental health, it's something that I'm very, very emphatic about. Feel free to reach out on Instagram. AJ Edelman is just my name. And anytime. Just send an email. Adam.Edelman is my first name, my last name, @olympian.org is my email. So just reach out on any of the social channels.
Thank you so much, AJ.
You are very welcome. Thank you.